Welcome to this episode, Unseen Battles, where Tony and I discuss the release of his book about his adversity, and we reflect on the realities of addiction. Founder of Redcard, Tony shows us heart-centered leadership in action, turning vulnerability into strength and pain into power. I'm Brad Turner, founder of Educating MINDY, on a mission to share real leadership experience.
Through the dark, bare feet on the gravel and glass, but the tunnel's getting brighter. Whoa, I can see LA.
So Tony, what was the hardest part in terms of revisiting your story whilst writing this book?
My first book, putting my story to print basically was the hardest part, because obviously that means I'm coming out of denial after so many years, and it means that everybody's going to know, including family and friends. So yeah, I think that was the hardest part, to actually have the mental strength and the courage to actually say, right, I'm going to go public with my story. And hence that was the first publication, which was called Redcard.
Who do you think it's going to most to appeal to?
It appeal to anybody and everybody, really, because not anyone in or specific groups or cohort groups in terms of demographics, in terms of ages, because in terms of what my story is about, which is obviously recovering from gambling addiction, it impacts people from all different walks of life. So whether it's gender, whether it's status, whether it's background, whether it's ethnicity, it really doesn't matter. So it will appeal to anybody and everybody, to be honest with you. And I've worked in this space in terms of the gambling recovery space and education space for over 11 years now, and I talk to and work with young, old, male, female, etc. So yeah, it's going to appeal to a lot of people.
Looking at the gambling perspective that you mentioned in the book, I mean, how did gambling shape or distort your sense of identity as a footballer, as a person?
But as a footballer, it affected my mental health more than anything. And coupled with that, it means that it's going to impact my productivity. So in terms of my performances, my mood, etc., my form was very sporadic to all the 6-7 football league clubs that I played for, and that was simply down to the way I was feeling, in terms of sometimes in a depressive state, sometimes feeling isolated, sleep deprivation, all kinds of things that come along with that gambling addiction journey, and the way you feel physically and mentally. So yeah, in terms of me as an individual, it changed me. Obviously not sort of connecting with people and connecting with friends, losing friends along the way, obviously, due to the lies and the deceit that come into play. So there's a lot going on basically within that journey. There's actually a lot going on physically and mentally in the way you are as an individual.
Definitely. I think in terms of my experience, I've had many knocks over the life that you do as you get older, from career perspectives, from struggles with finances, from trying to keep the roof over your head and looking after your family, trying to think about the future at the same time, in terms of that's a worry, that's a concern. You're thinking about, well, how do I sustain the way that I live? What does the future look like? These are stresses and strains, right, that really do knock sometimes your confidence, the way that you feel, your well-being, as you mentioned. And certainly in terms of, it affects your career sometimes, in terms of outcomes. If you don't make the right choices, that's a pressure that we don't often think about. We just kind of struggle or muddle through these things at times. And we don't think about it, because we just think we've got to get on, keep moving.
Yeah. It's interesting about the future, because when you're wrapped up in, I don't know what it's like in other professions, but in the professional football world, and you're wrapped up in the glamour of it, the adulation of it. As a young footballer, when I signed for 22 at Stoke, it's something that I never think will end. So because my mindset is like that, and a lot of young footballers will be like that, once you're in it and you're grinding it on a day-to-day basis, and you're loving every minute of it, that lifestyle, all that comes with it, then you're not really thinking about the future. And I was talking to someone the other day about, player aftercare and support after, that void that needs to be filled after you finish professional sport. But what exacerbated my situation was the fact that I was going through a gambling addiction, which meant that my mind was clouded. So I definitely wasn't really thinking about the future. I was just thinking about day to day, How am I going to clear my debts? How am I going to get out of this, etc. But as time went on, towards the end of my football career and coming to the last contract and all that, then obviously, yeah, I was feeling really stressed in terms of I've got all this debt, I've got this addiction, I'm not going to get another contract. So what does the future hold for me? And so that was really, really worrying in terms of I had no idea what I was going to do when I finished professional football.
Just going back a step to the fame point that you made, I think and somewhat more of a local level, let's say, people feel fame through career progression, through being in the spotlight. Obviously, yours is a completely different ballgame, pardon the pun, in terms of fame. How different was that from just saying a career progression to, obviously being on TV, being in the spotlight, being in world acknowledgement?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I think for many people, and for me, it was one of those situations where I've initially started at Bristol City as a scholar's apprentice. So I've had a taste of professional football, played for the first team at 16, 244 days. That was a record at the time. So I've had a taste of professional football. Then I come out of it, having been released at Bristol City 17 and a half, and have to go into the workplace. So I've experienced both sides. So that means that because I'm in the workplace, I'm used to the workplace, and then I get the opportunity to go back into football at 22, and I'm in this, glamour world of professional football. So what I wasn't able to do was adapt to that lifestyle, and by that I mean not get carried away with it all, with all the adulation that comes with it, all the, as I said earlier, all the glamour that comes with it, and the partying and women and the money and all that comes with it. I got carried away with all that, and so I wasn't able to adapt from 1 minute I'm playing for St Albans City in the Ryman League, non-league football, and the next day I'm travelling to Stoke to talk about a 3-year contract in the second division. So the whole world is turned upside down, gone into a completely different world. And then it's, how do you adapt when you go into that world? How do you keep your feet on the ground? How do you stay humble? How do you look after your finances? All those things. How do you not get involved in the distractions, i.e. such as gambling, etc. So yeah, I think the transition, I found it difficult to adapt, and just got swept along with the adulation and that journey of now I'm a second division professional footballer.
I guess being in that position, obviously you mentioned debt as well. You are under financial constraint in the sense of that, yes, you can make millions tomorrow, but the build up to that must have been a struggle. You've got growing pains in people's lives and businesses. In whatever you do, there's always a growing pain. What kind of struggle did you go through there?
Obviously, my salary is more or less quadruple from being a postman, etc. I'm getting sign-on fees, I'm getting win bonuses, all that kind of stuff. And I think, like today, 30 years on, it's slightly different. Yeah, yes, there was agents around them days. I did have an agent at my last football club, Lane Orient. But in terms of agents, in terms of guidance, in terms of support, in terms of life after sport, that kind of thing, there wasn't a lot around. So in terms of finances, it's one of them where you are more or less left to your own devices to look after your own finances. And that's why you've got to have good people around you, family in particular, close friends, etc., to make sure that, okay, this journey ain't gonna last forever. So the next 10 years, this is what you do. You put some money aside, you invest in this or whatever it is. And obviously a lot of footballers have made bad choices in terms of their investments. But it was different for me, because obviously, my money was invested in casinos and horse racing. So that, unfortunately, I fell into an addiction. But yeah, the financial side of it is really important to think about when you're going into professional football world and you're on a certain amount of money, etc.
Yeah, of course, not ignoring that the book is obviously about addiction as well. I mean, addiction often obviously narrows your world, it narrows your choices. How did it affect your decision making on and off the pitch?
I'd say that your mind is basically scrambled, because the problem with the addiction is that you are literally consumed with it. So you're going to make bad choices, and bad choices such as taking out massive loans, taking out charges and you know, loans against your own property, all those crazy choices that you're doing simply because you're basically trying to feed your habit and feed the addiction. So as you go along that journey and you lose X amount of money and the debt increases and everything escalates, then you're in a position where you're going to make bad choices in terms of taking out loans that are, you know, 200%, whatever they are. So it's more or less desperation. It's more or less desperation. That's what it is. You get to a point where you're desperate. You know, some people will turn to crime, etc. And you'll do whatever you can to continue to feed the habit, and you do whatever you can to try and get yourself out of a massive hole that you've dug. So yeah, it's not easy, really, really difficult. But that's the nature of the addiction.
I think I've had my fair share, certainly, of gambling as well. And you try and make quick wins to sort situations out financially. I've looked at stocks and shares. I've looked at going to a betting shop. I've looked at buying the scratch tickets. But I think I've come to realize myself that there's no quick win in that situation. You've got to make sound choices that build your wealth and your health. There isn't a quick just buy a ticket, win £1 million. It's a possibility, but you know, 1 in a trillion position chance that that's going to happen. But that bank, that family of bank, or bank of dad, or bank of mum, whatever it is that you're getting sources from when you're going through that struggle, that runs out eventually, and the trust is then lost, and then that affects relationships. You mentioned earlier that you've lost friends along the way. Definitely it impacts the way that you have a relationship with someone, because suddenly it becomes money orientated, grudges are built, problems are built, and then you find it hard to communicate, and then suddenly it falls apart and it breaks down. Yeah,
definitely. I think that's one of the biggest issues around the journey of a gambling addict as such, in terms of those impacted around you and what we call affected others. And when I look at my own journey in terms of who was impacted, my 5 brothers and a sister in particular, but obviously my mum and dad as well. And like you say, that the bank of mum and dad eventually, you know, you end up telling lies, etc. So yeah, that's really important, because we have to remember that the strain you're putting on them as well, on those loved ones, on my brothers and my sister, you know, it's a burden that it's hard for them to deal with as well. So you're bringing them along the journey with you, because I was bailed out countless times by my brothers and sisters. And you're right in saying that, unfortunately, for some, those relationships are fractured long term. You know, for some, they're not even repaired. You know, we have one of our team members at Red Card that doesn't even speak to his brother at the moment. So it can go really deep. But I was very fortunate that my brother stayed with me to this day. My sister's actually part of the education workshops we deliver now as an affected other. So yeah, I'm fortunate in that sense, but without a doubt, you have to really think about who else is impacted from your gambling.
I think one of my biggest saviors was continually learning, not to stop, thinking about how can I improve my ability, how can I strengthen my position, how can I get out of or avoid these situations rather than getting into them entirely. When did that moment happen for you?
Well, it's put it this way, well, the one thing about getting out of the situation, or thinking about how you get out of the situation, one thing with the gambling addiction, you're not going to wake up in the morning after 20 odd years, whatever it is, of problem gambling, that, and say, I'm not going to gamble anymore. So that's not going to happen. So you have to get professional help, and however that help comes is different for everybody. However that recovery journey looks like is different for everybody. It's down to that individual, what suits them. So for me, I had different forms of recovery, or different aspects of recovery. Some was around the family and you know, unity and that support network that I had, which was lucky I had that. Then there was the counselling. The counselling was interesting because it wasn't just about the gambling addiction. It was a private counsellor in a house, and just talking about the future and hope in the future, where you want to be in 5 years, all those kind of things. So that helped. And then obviously my Christian faith, which we'll touch on a bit more, but the Christian faith is another big part of my recovery journey. So that's those things put together is what helped and supported me to get where I am today. But in terms of answer to your initial question, in terms of what was the moment of going on BBC Breakfast in 2013 to acknowledge and accept that's the moment, because that's the moment where you actually own your addiction. Because for so long you haven't told XYZ about it, you've kept it to denial, you've kept it to yourself. It's been a secret addiction for years and years. So now comes the time where you have to own it, and you have to accept it and acknowledge it and get the support. So that was the time when I sat on that red sofa, lucid breakfast, and to the nation, and say, right, now it's time to get help. And it wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. Yeah, the book came out, and obviously that coincided with setting up the Red Card Project. But it still took a little bit of time, probably another year after that, before I, refrained from gambling on a massive scale, and started to put things into place, and started to look after finances. And obviously I've now had a business to run, so I had other people's other responsibilities as well. So yeah, it's a long journey back, but 11 years on for where I am today is a testament that you can recover, from adversity, from trauma, etc., and from any addiction.
I don't want to brush over that, but you make it sound really easy. That
Not easy.
gone through this whole journey, and of course it's been a huge struggle in your life, and obviously had major impacts. But obviously you've come out the other side. But you must be proud about. There should be a moment of acknowledgement there. That you should feel proud that you've acknowledged the journey you've gone through. You've released it in a book. You're sharing that with the world. That's going to have huge emotion attached to that.
Yeah, I am really, really proud. And I think the two proud moments that stand out is when I didn't know what I was going to do for the future. As we said earlier, I had no idea what the future held for me. But when we set up Red Card and then decided that we're going to do education awareness, then obviously it was a realization that, well, if you're going to educate people and you're going to raise awareness of gambling harms, then that means you're going to be going out to the community, to all kinds of different sectors, and you're going to be speaking in front of crowds and all that stuff, something I've never done. So when I did my first workshop in the St. George's Church in Enfield, and then finished that hour and a half, whatever it was, that's when I thought, and my daughter came, and that's when I thought, really proud that, right, I've done it. I thought it was going to be really, really hard, but because the lived experience and the passion, and you talk about something where you want to help people. And then I thought, wow, I never thought that I'd be going out facilitating and public speaking, etc. And obviously I've done bloody 60, 70 talks now. So I'm proud that I've added another string to my bow, but it's helping people at the same time. And then the other biggest thing, in terms of, regardless of, different achievements, such as being a CEO, such as being an author or being a professional footballer, all those things, the one thing that I would say that makes me proud and sort of gives me a realization and a validation that, yeah, you beat your demons, is the fact that I'm debt free. And I never thought since I was 19 that I was going to be debt free. And I look at Clear Score, which is obviously an act looking at your credit file, and when I read those lines that say no missed payment in 6 years, no CCJs, no defaults, etc., I think how I've gone from one extreme to the next, where it's 8, 9 CCJs and 20 defaults and bankruptcy and 32 creditors. I know we didn't mention it, but yeah, there was a time where the debt was so serious that it was 32 creditors in terms of borrowing, and £192,000 bankruptcy file, which ironically, it's funny when we talk, when you hear about people's testimonials and people's stories. Yes. I've listened to a few people, and for whatever reason, everyone's got their own reasons why, but some people will exaggerate, and exaggerate certain things when it didn't quite happen like that. But I'm real, and I'm transparent, and I'm honest. So when I tell my story and people are listening to my story, they will get the real story, what actually really did happen. So when I was at Kirklees College, to give them a shout out,
that's you being yourself. That's if people need to be more.
Yeah. So when I was at Kirklees College yesterday, speaking to 80 engineering apprentices, we got to the point of where my serious debt around bankruptcy, and I actually had my bankruptcy file with me, and I actually read out the creditors of the payday loans, of the Providence, of the Welcome Finance, all that. And so it's there in black and white, this happened. Yeah. And I think that's, they get it, they think this is real, that really actually happened to him. Yeah. So that's really important.
I grew up with two dads, and they had very different perspectives on money. One of them gambled consistently, didn't have a lot of income, worked as a postie,
Same with me.
didn't have much of, let's say, career aspirations, but pressures from family suddenly then changed that. Pressures at home, wanting to get married, have kids, go on holidays. All these things cost money.
Yeah.
Buy a car, buy a house,
Mm,
so that you've got
mm,
future sustainability. That's what the norm of the world pressures us to do in those
yeah.
in those situations. Um,
Mm,
so the postie dad spent all his life from that moment of recognition, probably early 20s, then putting money into pension pot, putting money into house, putting money into things. Died at 61, and
okay.
you can do these things, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. Don't get me wrong.
Mm,
But he spent his life gambling and also making sure that he had the roof over his head. So I guess it's under control in that perspective eventually, but spent all his life doing this, and then suddenly that's ended. It's gone.
yeah. That's
There's not
yeah.
there's a house left, a wife left, there's kids left. He's not there.
Yeah.
The other father worked as a cabbie. When of course money was good being a cabbie. Now it's obviously a lot tougher in London.
Yeah.
Spent all his life uh, blowing his money on every moment that he had. The moment the money went in his bank, it came back out because he was spending it on his kids, spending it on experience and thinking about life in the here and now, not the future.
Yeah.
Now doesn't have an awful lot of money behind him, but is still alive. So
But,
it's like,
yeah, but he's alive, but living beyond his means, so to
yes,
speak. Yeah.
yeah. So it's about finding a balance, is what it taught me. No one was in the wrong. That was the choice that they made back then. I'm not going to condemn them by their choices, but I'm going to learn from it,
Mm.
and I'm going
It's
to
definitely about balance. Definitely. Yeah. Having a good time, enjoying life, but also being responsible and being a bit mindful of the future. Because obviously, I've got a daughter and all that, and I want to make sure that when I leave this planet, she's left something. If I've got a partner, and then, but in between all that, yeah, you want to still enjoy your life as well.
Absolutely. The other point you made as well, that you now educate through your programs in terms of life lessons, how what you've acquired in that time, how you've adapted essentially, and you're sharing that vision and understanding with others so that they're not being or placing themselves in those positions essentially. And that's what I'm doing also. But I guess my position of where I developed myself and changed was to lean on becoming a niche or specialist in certain areas. I became a specialist in leadership management, project management, HR. I couldn't stop learning, and that was my way to cope in those scenarios and to grow. And now I have an unimaginable life where I'm a consultant. I pick and choose what I do in my hours. I'm not worried about income. I'm not worried about getting a roof over my head. It's a far cry from where I was 20 years ago. I was scrapping for income from jobs, trying to keep a job, trying to progress, not finding very much option in terms of career progression, because once people are in senior positions, then how do you move up and get up the ladder? And it meant moving jobs. But I grew up with this vision and understanding that you're supposed to get a job, keep a job, knuckle down. That's changed. Our whole perspective on life and work has changed in that time. If I hadn't moved those jobs, I wouldn't be where I am now in that perspective. So the foundations of our upbringing now have changed. I don't think it gets recognized a lot in terms of perspective over wealth and happiness. Tony, you should be really proud of releasing this book and sharing all of your vulnerability, all of your experience, the growth, the challenges, all of the pains you've been through are in that book. And you continue to offer your lessons learned through your program. So thank you to you for doing that and helping others to get out of these situations or to avoid them or to continue growing as individuals. But yes, you must be proud.
Yeah, cheers, Brad. I am proud. I think the book is the warts and all, and I think the main thing about this particular book, obviously, I mentioned earlier, the first publication was Red Card 2014. Second was Red Card, I Bet You Can Win, 2021. And this is the final chapter, what we call the final chapter. Hence the subtitle of it's full time. So my redemption is full time because it is. This is the end of the road. So it takes you from the start to right to the very end to the present day. And so, yeah, it will give people the main message about the book is about hope, and it's about making sure that people don't lose hope, whatever trauma adversity they're going through, whatever addiction they're going through. But obviously, in my case, it's gambling addiction. And I'm testament that, after approximately 25, 30-year gambling addiction, that I'm here talking to you. I'm doing interviews, I'm doing media, I'm a CEO, I'm a published author, I'm a public speaker. I share my story around the country. So, yeah, my redemption is all about making sure that people never lose hope. So if you are struggling with gambling, or anybody else that is struggling with gambling, whether that's family members, friends, work colleagues, etc., then please visit www.redcardgambling.org. You find lots of information on there in terms of interviews, in terms of podcasts, in terms of support services. And obviously we deliver a number of workshops to various different sectors and demographics. So if you need some support in whatever area problem gambling you need, then please visit the Red Card website and you'll find all the information that you need to support you and your loved ones.
A huge thank you to Tony Kelly. We hope to see more of him. This podcast is produced by educatingmindy.com, imparting project management expertise worldwide, and supported by dahliahr.co.uk, your HR partner for small and growing businesses in the UK. Remember to click that subscribe button to receive updates on further events and new releases, and kindly leave a review on your thoughts. Thank you for listening.
I've been running through the dark.